So picture this. You're sitting at a dealership, and the salesperson slides a paper across the desk. The monthly payment is $987. And honestly, in that moment, it doesn't sound that bad, right? You do the quick mental math, like, okay, that's basically $1,000 a month. You make good money. You can handle $1,000 a month. You sign, you drive off the lot. And for a while, it feels like you made a solid, responsible adult decision. You got a reliable car, you got a payment you can technically afford. Life is good. But here's the thing nobody tells you in that dealership. That $1,000 a month isn't costing you $1,000 a month. Not really. Not when you understand what money actually does or could do over time. When you factor in everything that's quietly happening in the background, that car payment is draining somewhere between 3 and 4 times what you think it is. And I don't mean that in a vague, hand-wavy way. I mean that in a very real, very specific, very mathematical way. My name is Emmy, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, the psychology behind financial decisions, and why otherwise smart people keep making the same costly mistakes without even realizing it. I'm not a finance bro. I'm not here to sell you a course or tell you to stop buying coffee. I just find this stuff genuinely fascinating. The gap between what we think our financial decisions cost us and what they actually cost us when you pull back the curtain and look at the full picture. And today, that full picture involves cars, specifically that $1,000 monthly car payment that millions of Americans are carrying right now, and why the true cost is something most people have never actually sat down and calculated. By the time we're done here, you're going to look at a car payment, or honestly any large recurring expense, in a completely different way. Not to make you feel bad, but because understanding this stuff is genuinely one of the most powerful things you can do for your financial future. The number that looks fine on paper. Let's start with the basic math, because even the surface-level numbers are kind of shocking when you actually write them out. $1,000 monthly car payment over a typical 60-month loan, that's 5 years, means you're paying $60,000 total, before interest. But of course, there is interest, because that's how car loans work. If you financed, say, $50,000 at a 7% interest rate over those 5 years, you'd end up paying somewhere around $10,000 to $12,000 in interest alone. So now your $50,000 car has actually cost you closer to $62,000 in payments. And right now, some of you are thinking, okay, that's just the cost of borrowing money. That's just how it works. And you're not wrong, technically, but we haven't even gotten to the part that makes your stomach drop a little, because those raw numbers, the principal plus interest, are just the beginning of the story. They're the part of the iceberg that's above the water. There's a whole frozen mass underneath that nobody's really talking about. Here's where I want you to slow down for a second and really think about something. $1 today is not worth the same as $1 in 5 years, and it's definitely not worth the same as $1 in 20 or 30 years. Money has what economists call time value, meaning money you have right now has the potential to grow into more money. When you spend money today, you're not just spending that dollar amount, you're also spending every dollar that money could have turned into if you'd invested it instead. This concept, called opportunity cost, is the single most underappreciated idea in personal finance, and it's the key to understanding why your car payment actually costs $4,000 a month. The invisible tax nobody talks about. Okay, so we've established that your opportunity cost turns a $1,000 payment into something far more expensive in real terms. But there's another layer here, and it involves the actual value of the car you're paying for. Because while you're making those monthly payments and losing the investment potential of that money, the car itself is simultaneously losing value at a breathtaking rate. Most new cars lose about 20 to 30% of their value in the first year alone. Let that sink in. You drive a $50,000 car off the lot, and within 12 months, it might only be worth $35,000 to $38,000. By the year 3, you might be looking at something worth $25,000 or less. By the time you finish paying off your 5-year loan, your car could be half of what you financed. And here's the cruel part. You've been paying interest this entire time on the original higher loan amount, not on the current value of the car, on what you originally borrowed. There's actually a phenomenon called being underwater on your car loan, or upside down, where you owe more on the car than it's currently worth. This happens to a shocking number of people, and it creates this horrible trap where you can't sell the car without taking a major financial loss, you can't easily trade it in without rolling that negative equity into your next loan, and you're essentially locked into the payment whether you want to or not. You're paying for something that's worth less and less every month, while sacrificing the investment returns that money could have generated. It's a double hit that most people don't fully register until they're deep inside it.
And we're still not done adding layers to this thing, because here's something else that quietly bloats the true cost of that $1,000 payment: the insurance that goes with it. When you finance a vehicle, your lender requires you to carry comprehensive and collision coverage. That's not optional. And on a newer, more expensive vehicle, the kind that comes with a 4-figure monthly payment, that insurance premium is going to be substantially higher than it would be on a paid-off older car with just liability coverage. So tack on, conservatively, $150 to $200 per month for the insurance premium difference. Now we're at $1,150 to $1,200 a month minimum just for the car and the required insurance. And then there's maintenance. Fancier cars, especially luxury brands or vehicles with complex technology, tend to have higher maintenance costs. Tires, oil changes, software updates, repairs that require specialized dealership tools. It adds up. I knew someone, I won't say who, but it was definitely not me, except it kind of was me years ago, who had a beautiful luxury SUV with a $900 payment, was paying nearly $300 a month in insurance, and then got hit with a $2,400 repair bill 18 months into owning it, and it wasn't covered under the warranty because of some technicality. That one repair alone, spread across the remaining months of the loan, added another $60 or so a month to the effective cost. These things pile up in ways that are hard to see coming when you're sitting in a shiny dealership and the salesperson is being very nice to you. The lifestyle inflation trap hiding inside the payment. There's a psychological dimension to all of this that I think deserves its own section, because it explains so much about how people end up in these situations and then keep cycling through them. It's called lifestyle inflation, and it works like this. As your income grows, your spending tends to grow with it. This isn't inherently bad. You should enjoy the fruits of your hard work to some degree, but the problem is when spending growth outpaces wealth building, you end up earning more and more while actually accumulating less and less in real terms. Cars are one of the most powerful triggers for lifestyle inflation because they're highly visible, they're tied to identity and status, and the financing system makes it very easy to acquire a car that costs way more than you could afford if you had to pay for it in cash. When you got your first job and made $40,000 a year, you drove a $6,000 used car. When you got a raise to $70,000, you upgraded to a $25,000 car. When you hit $100,000, suddenly a $50,000 car starts to feel reasonable because, hey, you make good money now. Each step feels logical in the moment, but each step also locks you into a higher monthly drain, less investment capital, and a longer road to financial security. The really insidious part is that most people don't consciously choose lifestyle inflation. It just kind of happens. You normalize a higher standard of living, you find it psychologically difficult to downgrade, and before long, the idea of driving something older or less impressive creates genuine discomfort, not because you actually need the fancy car, but because you've mentally anchored your identity to it, and that psychological anchor has a very real dollar cost attached to it. What wealthy people actually do, and it's not what you'd expect. Here's something that genuinely surprised me when I first started reading about the financial habits of people who build real, lasting wealth. A huge percentage of them, people with 7- and 8-figure net worths, drive relatively modest cars, not because they can't afford something nicer, because they understand, viscerally, the math we've been talking about. They've internalized the concept of opportunity cost so deeply that spending $1,000 a month on a depreciating asset feels almost physically painful to them. There's famous research, much of it summarized in books like The Millionaire Next Door, showing that the stereotypical image of wealthy people driving flashy cars is largely a myth. The people driving the $150,000 sports car are often not the people with $150,000 in savings. They're frequently the people with a $150,000 car and not much else. Meanwhile, the quiet millionaire next door might be driving a 5-year-old sedan they bought used and paid cash for, because they ran the math a long time ago and decided they'd rather have the $1 million than the car. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not saying you should never buy a nice car. I'm not saying all car debt is catastrophic or that you're doomed if you have a car payment right now. What I'm saying is that most people have never actually done this calculation. They've never sat down and looked at the full, true cost, including the opportunity cost, the depreciation, the insurance differential, and the compounding effect over time, and made a conscious, informed decision. They've just been making the same default choice that everyone around them makes without realizing what it's actually costing them over a 30-year horizon.
The Rule of 300, a simple way to think about this. I want to give you something practical here, a quick mental framework that you can actually use. Some financial educators talk about the Rule of 300 when it comes to monthly expenses. The basic idea is this: to figure out how much wealth you need in order to sustainably afford a monthly expense forever through investment returns, multiply that monthly expense by 300. So a $100 monthly expense requires roughly $30,000 of invested wealth to sustain indefinitely. A $500 monthly expense requires $150,000. And a $1,000 monthly car payment? That requires $300,000 in invested assets to sustain. Think about that for a second. To truly afford a $1,000 car payment, in the sense of being able to pay it from investment returns without drawing down your principal, you'd need $300,000 just sitting in investments. That's $250,000 dedicated to the car. How many of the people currently carrying $1,000 car payments have $300,000 in invested assets? Not many. Most are paying that $1,000 directly from their monthly income, which means every dollar going to the car is a dollar that cannot be building toward that $300,000. It's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, but the way out of it, the way to get to the point where your money works for you instead of the other way around, always involves widening the gap between what you earn and what you spend on liabilities. And for a huge chunk of the American middle class, the car payment is the single biggest lever in that equation. So, what do you actually do about it? Okay, so we've spent a while looking at the problem from multiple angles. Let's talk about what you can actually do with this information, because I don't want this to be one of those videos that makes you feel vaguely terrible and then sends you on your way with no direction. This is the part where we get a little practical. If you currently have a car payment and you're feeling some discomfort right now, good. Not because I want you to suffer, but because discomfort often precedes change. The first thing to do is just be honest about the full cost. Get out a piece of paper or open a spreadsheet and actually add it up. Monthly payment, total interest over the life of the loan, monthly insurance premium and what you'd be paying if you had an older, cheaper car instead, average monthly maintenance. Then look at what that total is, and then look at what you'd have in 30 years if that same amount were invested. Just see the number. Know the number. A lot of people have never done this, and it's genuinely clarifying. If you're not yet locked into a new car purchase, consider the 10-15-20 rule as a rough guideline for car buying. Spend no more than 10 to 15% of your monthly take-home pay on a car payment. Make at least a 20% down payment. And ideally, keep the loan term at 48 months or less. These aren't perfect rules, but they prevent the worst outcomes and keep your car costs from swallowing your financial life. And if you're genuinely open to it, and I know this sounds a little radical in the current culture, think seriously about buying used. A 3-year-old car that someone else took the depreciation hit on, bought with a small loan or even in cash if you can manage it, is one of the most financially powerful moves you can make. The car does the same thing a new car does. It gets you where you're going. It just doesn't come with the invisible $4,000 monthly price tag. The long game and why it matters more than you think. Here's the bigger picture I want to leave you with, because I think sometimes we get so deep in the mechanics that we lose sight of what this is really about. It's not about cars. It's about what you want your life to look like in 10, 20, 30 years. It's about whether you want to be the person who's always one car payment away from financial stress, or whether you want to be the person who has options. Real options. The option to take a risk on a business idea, or leave a job you hate, or retire earlier than your peers, or help your kids get started without debt, or weather a crisis without it becoming a catastrophe. Those options are bought with the gap between what you earn and what you spend, and every time you close that gap a little more, every time you choose the slightly less impressive car and invest the difference, you're buying a little more of your future freedom. It doesn't feel dramatic in the moment. It never does. The person who invests $1,000 a month doesn't feel richer than the person with the new car, not for a long time. Compound interest is slow at first, and then suddenly it isn't. And by the time it gets dramatic, the choices that led there are years in the past. I think about this sometimes when I see people in really beautiful cars sitting in the same traffic as everyone else. Like, the car is nice, it is genuinely nice, but is it $3,000 a month in real terms nice? Is it $1.5 million over 30 years nice? For most people, if they truly ran the math and made the choice with full information, the answer would probably be no. Not because material things don't matter, but because financial freedom, real freedom, the kind where your choices are made by preference rather than necessity, is worth more than any car. Let's bring this home. So here's the summary, and then I'll let you go. Your $1,000 car payment is not costing you $1,000. When you add the interest on the loan, the insurance premium required by the lender, the higher maintenance costs, and most importantly, the opportunity cost of what that money would become over decades if invested, you're looking at a real, effective cost that's somewhere between 3 and 4 times the face value of the payment. That's not hyperbole, that's just math. The mechanism behind this is compound interest working against you instead of for you, and the most powerful financial move most people can make without changing their job or their lifestyle in any dramatic way is simply to redirect money away from depreciating liabilities and toward appreciating assets. The car doesn't care. The market does. Time does, and the difference between those two destinations for your money over 30 years is the difference between financial stress and genuine freedom. None of this means you can never have a nice car. It means you should buy it with real information, not the comfortable illusion of an affordable monthly payment. It means running your own version of the numbers before you sign. It means understanding what you're trading when you trade your money for anything, and deciding with eyes wide open that the trade is worth it. That's not deprivation, that's power. And honestly, once you start thinking this way, it changes the way you look at everything, not just cars, subscriptions, housing, vacations, all of it. You start asking a different question than most people ask. Not just, can I afford this monthly, but what is this actually costing me, and is it worth that full price? Most things are less than they appear. Some things are worth every penny. The goal is to know the difference. Anyway, that's it for today. If this hit different, if there was a moment where something clicked or shifted a little, sit with it. Let it change something small. The best financial decisions usually start with a small, quiet shift in how you see the world. And sometimes that shift starts with a YouTube video at whatever time it is right now where you are. Take care of yourselves.